Coming back for the paint job. Alright, a building this size takes some time, so gotta exercise some patience and just jump right in. Let's do it. Okay, so the painting episodes are always the classiest episodes. Let's get started. So we're going to begin with the roof. So all the colors I'm going to be using are pretty standard throughout a number of different ranges. Craft paints, artist paints. The first thing the base coat's going to be is burnt sienna, which is, well, it's a oxide color. And I don't really know enough about geology to tell you much about it, but it's great for this. So I'm just laying down a base coat, kind of. So I'm just doing one layer, and it will not reach full opacity like this. So you're gonna get a lot of the color of the actual wood and the pine bark showing through. So yeah, this acrylic's very transparent with only one coat. So when that's done, I'm going to get the second color out of there, and that is going to be raw sienna. So it's more yellow than burnt sienna and has kind of a almost yellow ochre golden glow to it. I take that, and with a flat brush, I'm going to do a technique called overbrushing, which is great for quick terrain jobs. And what it is, it's basically a similar technique to dry brushing. However, the paint can be a little watered down and a little wet, and with the flat of the brush, I am just hitting all the raised areas. In fact, the majority of the areas are getting hit, so only the deepest recesses in the shingles will escape the overbrushing. So it's kind of like a second layer. And then, when that dries, for the highlight, I'm actually going to dry brush in a yellow ochre color and just hit all the most extreme edges of the shingles and kind of build up the highlights. So aged wood can look a number of different ways. It can have a grayish tone, it could have a yellowy or green. So yeah, I'm going yellow on this one. And once the roof's done, start with the bricks. And I'm doing a base in true burgundy, which is basically just a deep red color, essentially. And again, one coat. I'm not going for full opacity here for time saving intentions, and just because you don't need it, because it's going to get layered up with a bunch of other things. Make sure you hit the chimney and stuff. Then I'm going to do the similar overbrushing technique with a toasted terracotta, which is a darker form of terracotta, and I'm basically hitting the flat parts of every brick, not getting into the recesses. When that overbrush is complete, I come in with actual terracotta, which is kind of a browny orange almost, and do a dry brush. Now, I'm not satisfied with this. I thought I would be, but bricks have a lot of variation in color tones when you look at them. So after I get done with the dry brush, I have to move on to a different technique. Just make sure you get along the windows, chimneys, yeah. And when dry brushing, of course, take as much of the paint off as you can. And when you think there's no paint on there, take more off. And just keep building up layers. You can always build up more paint, but it's hard to take it down. So in order to fix the monotone bricks, I just take an artist sponge and mix up a couple of tones of burnt sienna, raw sienna, terracotta colors, and I swirl them all together, and I don't mix them completely. I just make sure there's kind of like a vortex of color on the palette. Then I take an artist sponge. Yeah, see, there you go. Okay, artist sponge coming in hot. You can just use, honestly, any type of sponge you have, but artist sponges have a lot of ridges and bits that stick out in random ways, more so than regular foam. And I get most of the paint off, and there is some color variation in there, and I just start stippling it all over the bricks. So it'll give some burnt sienna here, some raw sienna there, some browns. So it makes for a more interesting, varied brick color, which is how bricks appear. And still, that did not assert the colors enough, so I just came in with some burnt sienna, raw sienna, and picked a few bricks here and there and just gave them a translucent coat just to kind of tint them a different color. And that was pretty much it for the bricks. So moving on to the wood beams that serve as trim for the entire building, I'm just going to base coat that in a mid brown. The colors, the craft paint colors that I'm using are from Folk Art, which is my favorite craft paint brand, and specifically this is Bark Brown. And I'm just going over all the beams. You can paint the door whatever color you want. I actually paint the door as the same color as the roof. So that's me just hitting the beams on the top, the windows and the windowsills. If you're doing a building with a lot of wood, I recommend just varying the wood color. It just adds more visual interest than everything just being the same monochromatic wood. Okay, so here I start painting the plaster, and that's going to be in a light beige. I wanted to paint the plaster, so, in the event that I made a mistake painting white over brown, I wouldn't have to rebuild up highlighted or dry brushed areas on the wood beams. So I'm doing it right now, getting down the base coat for the plaster, just in case I make any mistakes. I can fix it by just applying the original base coat for the wood, because it's easier to paint brown over white than white over brown. And after the light beige coat, I simply come in with a layer of off-white and just paint that right on top. So why do I do beige if I'm just going to paint white on top of it? Well, the white is not going to be completely transparent, so it's going to be tinted by the undercoat of the beige. And also, it's easier to build up opacity in terms of a white paint when you have kind of an intermediary undercoat, so you don't have to do a lot of layers of white. So that's another reason for the beige. Okay, and then I overbrush a gray-brown color. So I just mix gray and brown, and I start overbrushing the wood beams. So these are going to be kind of grayish weathered wood as opposed to the yellowed weather wood on the roof shingles. And this is almost a second coat of paint. It's hitting everything but the most recessed details in these wood beams. I'm not taking a lot of paint off the brush. I'm not making sure it's dry. And there you go. It's starting to get a gray tone. And then finally, I come in to finish up the wood with a dry brush of, browny cream color. The Folk Art color is called Barnwood, and it's perfect for this, but it's pretty much just a browny cream. And I do a pretty heavy dry brush, going along the wood beams, the window trim, everything. What you want when you're painting terrain and miniatures in general is contrast. So you can build up contrast in terms from like texture, from light and dark, everything like that. And speaking of light and dark, we're going to be making a wash. So in order to make this, I'm mixing an eyeballed mixture of Liquitex Matte Medium, Liquitex Flow Improver, getting that to a kind of skim milk consistency, then adding a sepia ink. And this is not sepia wash, it's sepia ink. And I'll do a more in-depth video, but these homemade washes aren't really perfect, and you just kind of have to get a hang of the mixture and the ratios. But it's pretty much 1 part matte medium to 5 parts water, a couple drops of Flow Improver, and 10 drops of ink. That's pretty much what I used of the sepia ink. And yeah, I just apply that along the wood beams, on the shingles. When it comes to the bricks, I'm not lathering it all over the bricks. I'm basically just putting it into the recesses, doing some recess shading with the wash. Because it has Flow Improver or Flow Aid in it, it just sinks right into those recesses. Okay, for the plaster, we're gonna do something a little different. I'm gonna come in with an Army Painter light tone, which is almost a beige or a yellowy wash. And I'm gonna spread that all around the plaster areas. Applying a thin coat, making sure it doesn't pool up irregularly. And once that's dried, I'm gonna come in with a second wash, and this is gonna be Army Painter Mid-Brown, which is almost a reddy brown color. And I'm going to kind of feather it out in the areas of where the shadow or water damage would fall. You know, water buildup. It's kind of like a subtle way of weathering. And if you find like you've gone too hard with the wash, what you can do is come in and just dry brush a white over the plaster and hit the most raised areas, and that will kind of bring the color back up. So I know I said we'd get to weathering, but some of these videos were getting really long, and I wanted a dedicated video for the windows because they're a little more complicated than I originally thought. So that's the paint job. I hope this was helpful in terms of, inspiring your own Tudor style house builds. If you have any questions, please put it in the questions. I'd love to answer them. Any video recommendations or requests, anything like that. Like, share, and subscribe if you feel so inclined. Only if you want to, really. Thanks so much for watching. You can check us out on Facebook at Iridian Games. Have a great day.